Good morning. Glad to be here again. Glad to have you with us. And for all those out there in www, whatever, YouTube, Facebook, whatever it is, we are humbled that you are joining with us this morning. We are going to, as time permits, study as far as we can into Revelation chapter 13. Revelation chapter 13. Last week, in a rather brief way, we concluded Revelation chapter 12 and seeing what the result of the woman escaping the dragon time and again, how he was so upset. He cast out a flood out of his mouth. Verse 15, Revelation 12. Cast that flood out of his mouth, that flood of water, after the woman, that he might cause her to be carried away of the flood. He is still trying, he's still persecuting, and still trying to be done with her. She's in the way of his purpose. And the earth helped the woman, and the earth opened her mouth and swallowed up the flood which the dragon cast out of his mouth. So, from an unlikely place comes help. The earth opens up, the flood is consumed, dragon fails all over again. So what happens? Verse 17, Revelation 12. And the dragon was angry, wroth with the woman, and went to make war with the remnant of her seed, which keep the commandments of God and have the testimony of Jesus Christ. Can't get to her. I'm going after her kids. And that's what's taking place. What can be implied from what we have studied so far through chapter 12? Simply enough, that the woman was faithful. God provided her a way of escape. In her faithfulness, she was rearing children who were faithful as well. And if the dragon can't get to the woman, he's going to go to the next her descendants, her offspring. Then we pick up in chapter 13 where John sees a vision. Two beasts that are appearing in this vision and have agendas. Revelation 13:1. Let's go ahead and read this entire chapter. John says, And I stood upon the sand of the sea, and saw a beast rise up out of the sea, having 10 horns and 7 heads, and upon his horns 10 crowns, and upon his heads the names of blasphemy. And the beast which I saw was like unto a leopard, and his feet were as the feet of a bear, and his mouth as the mouth of a lion. The dragon gave him his power, and his seat, and his great authority. I saw one of his heads as it were wounded unto death, or mortally wounded. And his deadly wound was healed, and all the world wondered after the beast. And they worshipped the dragon which gave power unto the beast. And they worshipped the beast, saying, Who is like unto the beast? Who's able to make war with him? You get the idea there. Who is able to stand against him in battle? Who could defeat the beast? And the implication is nobody. This is their praise and adoration to the beast. And there was given unto him a mouth speaking great things and blasphemies, and power was given unto him to continue 42 months. And he opened his mouth in blasphemy against God, and to blaspheme his name, his tabernacle, them that dwell in heaven, aka the remnant of the seed of the woman. And it was given unto him to make war with the saints, those that dwell in heaven, and to overcome them, and power was given unto him over all kindreds, and tongues, and nations. And all that dwell upon the earth shall worship him. All right, there's that contrast again, as we've seen in chapter 12. The contrast of those who dwell in heaven, verse 6, and those who dwell upon the earth, verse 8. Whose names are not, those who dwell on the earth, not written in the book of the life of the Lamb, slain from the foundation of the world. If any man have an ear, let him hear. He that leadeth into captivity shall go into captivity. He that killeth with the sword must be killed with the sword. Here is the patience and the faith of the saints. There's one beast. Now the second beast. And I beheld another beast coming up out of the earth, or the land. And he had two horns like a lamb, and spake as a dragon. And he exercised all the power of the first beast before him, causes the earth, and them which dwell upon the earth, or them which dwell therein. All right, there's your verse 6. Those that dwell, verse 8, those that dwell upon the earth, to worship the first beast, whose deadly wound was healed. And he does great wonders, so that he makes fire come down from heaven on the earth in the sight of men, and he deceives them that dwell upon the earth by means of those miracles which he had power to do in the sight of the beast, saying to them that dwell on the earth, that they should make an image to the beast, which had the wound by the sword, and did live. And he had power to give life unto the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak, and cause that as many as would not worship the beast, or the image of the beast, should be killed. And he causes all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand, or in their foreheads. And that no man may buy or sell, save that he had the mark, or the name of the beast, or the number of his name. Herein is wisdom. Let him that has understanding, excuse me, count the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 666. Excuse me, or 666, as many like to say. Now, newsflash: we're not going to get very far in this chapter this morning, and it's easy to understand why. These things, these kind of concepts, tend to be a little bit obscure to us today. Well, I take that back. Not the concepts, but the way that this is worded tends to be obscure to us today. However, the concepts are not. You got this beast rising up out of the sea. We're thinking Loch Ness, right? But you've got this beast that rises up out of the sea. And Daniel's going to help us understand what John is talking about here, because John is seeing the exact same thing that Daniel saw. Except John's visions, the manner in which he's seeing them, tend in a way to be backwards from that which Daniel saw. There's some details missing, some details added, so on and so forth. Daniel is not violating the don't add unto or take from Scripture. I'm sorry. John is not doing that. John is not violating that. But what's taking place is you've got the prophecy in Daniel, and then the visions that John is given declaring the fulfillment of said prophecy. And I'll show you that as we're moving on. Like I said, we're not going to get very far. Now, the concept is simple. You've got a faithful group of people who are keeping the commandments of God. They have the testimony of Jesus. And the dragon can't stand them. So he's making war with them for 42 months. Or 3.5 years. Or 1,260 days. You get the idea. But he can't handle it. Remember how last week we'd spoken on how power-hungry entities or power-hungry people, they will do whatever they have to do. They'll step on who they have to step on, murder who they have to murder in order to get what it is they want. They just want power. So they're going to do whatever it takes. You have that very picture right here with this dragon. He's got to have the power. He's got to have it all. Or I may dare say at this point in time, when John is writing this, he has to keep this power. He can't let it be taken from him. Matthew 21. He cannot let the Son, the heir, receive the kingdom. It's the same dragon that would kill the Son and try to seize the inheritance for himself. This dragon, he's going to meet his end. We won't see that until Revelation 20. These two beasts of Revelation 13, however, are going to see their end before that. Revelation 19. And before we get into the reiteration, how the prophets spoke, how they explained things and repeated themselves using different figures, different parables, different examples, they would do this to get their message across and get the point made. They may use the figure of a basket of summer fruit at one point and turn around and describe the same event, the same concept, using a fig tree. They use different figures, different examples, things that these folks were familiar with, extremely familiar with. They would use these to portray their prophecy. Holy men spake as they were moved by the Holy Spirit. They spake because the Holy Spirit was moving them to say what they had to say. But yet they could use it, their own personality and style, to describe it to the people whom they were standing before, whom they were writing to. This is where audience relevance comes in. All right, let's look at chapter 13 and verse 1 real quick. John says he stands upon the sand of the sea. And he sees a beast rise up out of the sea having 7 heads, 10 horns, or as some translations, they flip-flop that, and they'll put 10 horns and 7 heads. And upon his horns 10 crowns, and upon his heads the name of blasphemy. Some translations say names plural of blasphemy. Makes no difference. It's all blasphemy against God. That's the idea of the blasphemy here. It's a blasphemy of exaltation, as we're going to see as this was given to Daniel. We're going to see that here in a little bit. You're going to want to compare Daniel chapter 7 with this beast. And I'll explain why as we go. Daniel chapter 7 compared to Revelation 13:1. John stands upon the sand of the sea. All right. Daniel chapter 7, after Daniel describes the time frame in which he's writing in and the visions that he had in his head when he was upon his bed. Then he, Daniel, wrote the dream and told the sum of the matters. Some translations of that say the important or the main facts. It's all important. It's prophecy of the last days. It's prophecy of when Christ was going to be victorious. It's prophecy of that first century. So Daniel writes the main facts of the matters, the sum of the matters. There's details that are missing, but obviously details that we don't necessarily need to understand. Details that they needed at that time. That Jesus would quote from Daniel chapter 9 and Daniel chapter 12 and Matthew 24, declaring the time frame that Daniel was written for. Daniel 7 and verse 2. Daniel spake and said, I saw in my vision by night, and behold, the four winds of the heaven strove upon the great sea. So here you have Daniel in a vision seeing four winds of heaven striving, stirring up the great sea. And John sees, he's standing on the seashore and he's looking out at the great sea. And out of this sea, well, it doesn't say great, I realize that in Revelation 13:1. But John sees this beast come up out of that sea. You would consider Luke 21:25, where our Lord is describing the time of the end, the time in which Rome was going to surround Jerusalem, the holy city was going to be surrounded, and the days of vengeance, in which all things which are written were going to be fulfilled. Luke 21 verse 22. He goes on and he says in verse 23 of Luke 21, but woe unto them that are with child, and to them that give suck, them that nurse, in those days, for there shall be great distress in the land and wrath upon this people. He's not talking about you and I, is he? He's being demonstrative. He's saying, wrath upon this people. They shall fall by the edge of the sword, shall be led away captive into all nations, and Jerusalem shall be trodden underfoot, trodden down of the Gentiles, until the times of the Gentiles be fulfilled. Now notice this. And there shall be signs in the sun, and in the moon, and in the stars, and upon the earth. Note this phrase, distress of nations, with perplexity. The sea and the waves roaring. Now I ask you, and let common sense speak here. Jesus is describing a time to these people in which their city was going to be trodden down by Gentiles. What in the world does it matter if there's a 50-foot tsunami out in the ocean? Jerusalem was nowhere near that sea. The sea and the waves roaring. What does that have to do with the perplexity of the times? What's that got to do with the distress of nations? He's reiterating Daniel. The four winds of heaven striving upon the great sea, or stirring up the great sea. The sea and the waves roaring. What do you get when the great winds, when they stir up the sea, what do you get? You get waves. These signs. This is one of them that Daniel seen in that vision. And Jesus is just, maybe not so much to us, but to them back then, he's just outright saying, look, you are that generation. This is you that Daniel seen in a vision. It's a time of religious, political, and social unrest. Think about it. The sea and the waves roaring. It's a distress of nations, as it's worded in Luke 21:25. Jesus himself saying that. A time when there's unrest everywhere. And this was in fact taking place. You had political unrest in Rome and everything that they were over. You had social unrest everywhere. Many of the provinces of Rome did not like being under the thumb of Rome. They did not like the yoke that Rome put on. There was a lot of social unrest between groups. These chasms that existed between each group. Well, here's one for instance. The Samaritans and the Jews. Those that lived in and around Jerusalem. And, well, they populated the land of Judea. And then the Samaritans, social unrest. Yeah, I know we got that going on today. You don't have to, you don't really have to watch the news. You can probably see it out in your everyday life when you go out. There's an unrest. It's problems. But you have all of this type of unrest, the religious unrest. Think about that. Numerous idols in the world. They're being brought into Jerusalem by the multitude of business. Old King James calls it traffic. The business has taken place there. You have the very Sanhedrin themselves that have idolized the temple and everything that's in the temple. They've just totally made a golden image out of it, a molded image. Their own position they idolize. They don't want it taken away from them, John 11. You've got the zealots who are just totally zealous for their nation, just like Jonah was. Everything Israel. And they claim to be fighting for God, but they commit so much or so many horrible atrocities in the name of God. They could not call themselves followers of Yahweh. Not in any way. But that's what they did. They said that they were doing these things in the name of God, the name of Yah, the name of El, the name of Yahweh. Some of our translations call him Jehovah. In God's name. They were doing it by his authority. And I could go on and on and on. But enough. You get the idea. You get the point. John is seeing this unrest, right? So you picture this. He's looking out at the sea because he's standing on the seashore. He's looking out and he sees a beast coming up out of the midst of all this unrest, if we may use Daniel's vision. And this beast has certain characteristics. He has 7 heads. He has 10 horns. And upon his horns, he has a crown on each, 10 crowns. And upon his heads, the name of blasphemy. Now, if you literally imagine this beast, before we get into verse 2, here's a beast that has 7 heads, but yet it has 10 horns. You kind of think, well, shouldn't it have, if it's got 7 heads and it's got 10 horns, shouldn't it have 14 horns? So it have 2 horns on its head, you know? You know, people like to make this beast out to be, you know, Satan with the horns and the pitchfork, forked tail and all that stuff. Just something to think about. Think about this, when you have 7 heads, yet you've got 10 horns. One of those heads is going to have 4 horns, ain't it? Think about it. Okay, that's important for what we're going to see in Daniel. Daniel chapter 7 and verse 7. Daniel says, after this I saw in the night visions, and behold, a beast, dreadful and terrible, strong exceedingly, had great iron teeth, and it devoured and brake in pieces, and stamped the residue with its feet. And it was diverse from all the beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns. Somebody says, well, it doesn't have 7 heads like this beast here in Revelation 13. Maybe it did. But Daniel didn't record it. It goes back to the sum of the matters. Verse 1, Daniel 7. We'll get into all this symbolic language. Heads were usually the rulers of something. But we'll get into all that. We're not that far yet. It does have, Daniel's vision does have this 4th beast, has a characteristic like that of this beast that John has seen. Okay, 10 horns. And they have the sea in common also. Now, he had on his head, or on his heads, plural, the name of blasphemy. I think it's one name rather than more than one name. It's in the singular here and it's plural later on in Revelation 17. But it's one name of blasphemy. You look in Daniel chapter 7 and verse 8. I consider the horns, Daniel says. You know, the 10 horns of that beast that he saw. And behold, there came up among them another little horn, before whom were 3 of the first horns plucked up by the roots. Remember how I said one of those heads is going to have 4 horns? And behold, in this horn, this little horn, were the eyes like the eyes of a man, and a mouth speaking great things. That phrase, great things, is synonymous with blasphemy. You'll see what I mean here in a little bit. You look down in Daniel chapter 7 and verse 25. Scroll down here. He shall speak great words against the Most High. He's going to wear out the saints of the Most High and think to change times and laws, and they shall be given into his hand until a times, and a half, the dividing of times. The 42 months, 1,260 days. This beast, verse 2, the beast which I saw was like unto a leopard, and his feet were as feet of a bear, and his mouth as the mouth of a lion, and the dragon gave him his power and his seat and great authority. Now I realize back when this was first being written, it was not divided up into chapter and verses like it is for us today. We have this convenience today for a purpose of study. We can divide it up, portion it out, and reference it. As I'm standing up here saying we're studying Revelation 13, they would have just said, well, when it's talking about that beast out of the sea. Here we are in chapter 13. We're in verse 2 now. They would have just said, well, it's where it describes that beast like a leopard, but it had feet of a bear and a mouth of a lion. It's for our benefit, and it helps. At the same time, it's not to be recognized as being inspired. Mark chapter 8 and the beginning of Mark chapter 9 are a fine example. These are not inspired chapter and verse distinctions, divisions. Because in Mark chapters, the last part of Mark chapter 8, and early part of Mark chapter 9, all of that is together in Matthew's account and in Luke's account, all in the same chapter. It's not divided up like it is in Mark 8 and 9. So, just a word of caution. We don't want to put too much emphasis on the chapter and the verse distinction. But enough of that. This beast, he looks, well, he's like a leopard. His feet, they're like a bear's feet. His mouth is like the mouth of a lion. The dragon gives him his authority and his seat and his great authority. Look over here in Daniel chapter 7, verse 3. Daniel sees 4 great beasts that come up from the sea, diverse from one another. You know, John sees 1, Daniel sees 4. The first was like a lion and had eagle's wings. And I beheld till the wings thereof were plucked. And it was lifted up from the earth and made to stand upon the feet like a man. And a man's heart was given to it. And behold, another beast, a second like to a bear, And it raised itself up on one side. And it had 3 ribs in the mouth of it, between the teeth of it. And they said thus unto it, Arise and devour much flesh. And after this I beheld, and lo, another, like a leopard, which had upon the back of it 4 wings of a fowl. The beast had also 4 heads, and dominion was given unto it. These numbers, they get extremely interesting when you start tying them together. And you'll note the 4 heads. But look at the order that Daniel puts them in. Daniel says the first is like a lion, the second like a bear, and the third like a leopard. John, in his description of this beast from the sea, goes in reverse order. Exactly. He starts out with a leopard in describing. He says it's like a leopard, but it's got the feet of a bear. Now, any leopard that has the big, clumsy feet of a bear is not going to move very fast, is it? So this is obviously not a reference to its speed, but his mouth is as the mouth of a lion. Revelation 13, you got leopard, bear, lion. Daniel chapter 7, you got lion, bear, leopard. Later on, it's described. These are kingdoms. Each one. And that 4th beast, even itself, is a kingdom. A lot of people think it's Rome. I don't. But that's, I won't get into that just yet. I don't want to cause too much confusion. What we do have taking place here is John is seeing. This is why I believe that is. John puts it in reverse order because the beast that he's seeing, he's beholding, has characteristics of 3, actually 4, of the kingdoms that Daniel saw in Daniel chapter 7. It has all the characteristics of each, well, it has characteristics of each kingdom that Daniel saw in his vision. Now, that's my take on it. Some people disagree, obviously. Make of that what you will. But it's extremely interesting because of how prophecy works. They use figures, they use metaphors, they use all of these things to describe what they're seeing or what the message they're trying to get across to the people. And here, Daniel sees this weird beast, and John sees this weird beast. Have you ever seen, maybe you have seen the artist rendition of these things. One of these days I'll bring it, put it up on the projector on the wall, show y'all just how ludicrous this looks. That's why it's figurative language. These are characteristics. Another interesting thing I would note is this beast that John saw. It was like a leopard. Let me move down. Maybe I can get to it quick enough without taking too much time. I did not catalog this out like I wanted to because my study ran on into the time that it was time to come up here and start class, but did not catalog this out. I've got a catalog somewhere, and just like my mind is absent, so is it. Daniel 7 in verse 15. Listen to this. Daniel says, I was grieved in my spirit in the midst of my body, and the visions of my head troubled me. I came near unto one of them, stood by, and asked him the truth of all this. So he told me, and he made known to me the interpretation of the things. So Daniel does not have to interpret it. It's being interpreted for him, right? That's easy to see. Anybody with half a brain look at that and say, no, this is easy. Whoa, why don't they do that every place, These great beasts which are four kings, which shall arise out of the earth. That word earth is the Hebrew word which corresponds to the Greek word for our New Testaments, G. I believe. Don't quote me on that. I'll have to double check that. But it's the Hebrew word ara, which describes the whole inhabited earth. All right? Now keep that in mind. These four kings in other translations are translated four kings representing their kingdoms. So you think about it. We go back and we look at Daniel chapter 2, and we do some comparison work. We come up with what we've always come up with. You got Babylon being that first one, who in this situation would be the lion, right? That head of gold. Then you've got the next kingdom that comes along, and the kings that represent it would be just like in Daniel chapter 8. You've got the ram and the he-goat. The ram would represent Medo-Persia. The ram has two horns. One's exalted above another. One's higher than the other horn. Odd-looking ram, but nevertheless, he's just like what Daniel sees here with this bear lifting itself up on one side. All right? And then you've got the lion who comes along. I'm sorry, I got that all backwards because John names it backwards, but you've got this leopard that comes along. Fast, speed. He had upon the back of him 4 wings of a fowl. That represents his speed, how fast he's moving. You look in Daniel chapter 8, the he-goat that's moving, he's moving so fast his feet don't even touch the ground. The beast had also 4 heads, and dominion was given to it. When you look back in your history, you're going to find that Alexander the Great, who represents his kingdom of Greece, had 4 main generals. Now, at the time of I almost said Nebuchadnezzar, Alexander's death, his kingdom, all of it, provinces and all, was divided amongst his 4 generals. He has 4 heads. Leaders, exalted position, or an elevated position. Then you look and you see in Revelation 13:2, this beast has feet of a bear. Now I want you to compare that with this. After this I saw in the night visions, this is Daniel 7, verse 7, and behold a 4th beast, dreadful and terrible, strong exceedingly. It had great iron teeth, like a lion, and it devoured and brake in pieces and stomped the residue with its feet of a bear. And it was different from all of the beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns. Dreadful and terrible would be your leopard, wouldn't it? If the stamping. You see what I'm getting at? The comparison work that we have between the first time the prophecy was given in a vision, Daniel seen the vision, and John sees the fulfillment of that vision in his visions. You see how beautiful this fits together? That's as far as we're going to get today. It's time. I'm going to have to stop it right now. But I just wanted you to consider these things. There are a lot of details that we do have to consider when we're trying to understand the sum of the matter, like Daniel had written it. Daniel wrote the sum of the matter. And when we start comparing our details from our Old Testaments with that which we have written of prophecy in our New Testaments, you're going to find that these details actually match. May not be in the way that you think they should match, but they do match. They fit just like, you clasp your hands together. See how nice they fit together? It works just like that. Like my hand and my wife's hand. It's like they were made for one another, so they fit together so good. That's the way we have it between our Old Testaments and our New Testaments. You want to know the meaning of Revelation? You go back to the first 39 books of your Bibles. You're going to find the answer. No need to come up with the idea of a attack helicopter 64. The AH-64, the Apache. No need to think of an A-1 Abrams, or actually, the A-1H1, I think it is now. I don't remember the newest Abrams that they have out. The tank. That wicked tank that we got for our military. No need to think of that or some neutron bomb, whatever. The czar of all bombs like Russia has, whatever. Don't need to think of it that way. We need to look at this beast and understand that he has characteristics of the vision that Daniel saw. Daniel was given the interpretation of his vision. So what Daniel sees is what John sees later on. And what John sees is shortly to come to pass, for the time is at hand. Revelation 22 and verse 6, Revelation 22 and verse 10. No reason to stretch this far out beyond John's time, because John said the time is now. The time is at hand back then. So whatever he's seen was something that's taking place back then. Now, does that mean that we cannot glean from this? Of course not. Look at what's going on today, folks. What do you think's driving the agenda in our country? And that same agenda that it has in common with most other countries across the world. What do you think's driving that agenda? Is it not a dragon? Now, what's enforcing that agenda? The first beast of that dragon. And after the enforcer, what do you have taking place? You've got the propaganda that is mesmerizing the populace. The beast from the earth. Later called in Revelation the false prophet. Folks, Hitler used this exact same diagram here to come to power. Look it up. Where do you think he got it? Is that taking place today? You betcha. Not like Hitler, obviously, in the grand scheme of things. But you can tell that it is, in fact, taking place. Can we glean anything from this? Yes, brethren. God is always victorious. You and him, you're victorious. Doesn't matter what happens to the nations of the world. That's how this works. The beast and the false prophet that we're seeing in chapter 13, Revelation 19 and verse 20, they're cast in the lake. Well, let me read that for you real quick. And the beast was taken, and with him the false prophet that wrought miracles before him. Remember how we read that in Revelation 13? With which he deceived them that had received the mark of the beast and them that worshipped his image. These both were cast alive in the lake of fire burning with brimstone. There's your second death. That's the destruction according to the very next chapter. All right? The beast and the false prophet. What we're reading about in chapter 13. Their end is destruction. All right? Revelation chapter 20. Let me go back Yeah, there it is. All right. After the great battle of Gog and Magog, the great war that takes place. Verse 10 of Revelation 20. The devil. What have we seen the devil described as in Revelation 12? The serpent of old. The dragon, right? The adversary. The devil. Same entity as Revelation 12. That deceived them was cast in a lake of fire and brimstone, where the beast and the false prophet, and shall be tormented day and night forever and ever. So he receives the same end, destruction, 2 Thessalonians 1 and 2, as the beast and the false prophet. What we're reading about, studying, or looking a little more intently at in Revelation 13, 1 and 2, actually Revelation 13 verses 1 through 10. This is the enforcer of the will of the dragon. Adrian Rogers, I used to listen to him all the time. He used to describe this as the unholy trinity. The dragon, the beast, the false prophet. Take that for what it is. Or just whatever you want to do with it. Whatever you think of it. It's no coincidence. Brethren, I know I rambled a lot. Did a lot of reading. We just did some simple comparison work. Part of our study to more distinctly understand what John is seeing in the vision. And to greatly understand what they were going through. When we compared Revelation 13 with Daniel 7, and there's numerous other passages we go to, but as you see, the time's up. Well, we don't have that much time at each sitting. But you have this comparison being made, you come up with what? That great sea. There's revelation being made. All right, to you, when you study and compare, this is being revealed to you. The sea that John was looking out over, which was the great sea that Daniel saw in the four winds of heavens, striving upon it and stirring it up, as the New King James says. It's just a time of unrest, a time of madness, anarchy. And we can note that same time. You can go back to your secular historians, and you're going to find that same thing taking place. All of that. Religious, social, and political unrest in that first century. I'll leave it with that. Next week we'll pick up in verse 3. I can hear it already. Whoa, we're moving slow through this one too. Look, there's so many goofy ideas out there today about who and what and why the beast is. Okay? But if we'll let Scripture interpret, look at it this way. The angel, Daniel was given a vision, okay? And he just desired to know. That's our desire, right? We just desire to know what's taking place in that vision. We want to understand a little deeper what Daniel was seeing. Or maybe not. I don't know. You make up your own mind. When we study these things, that's our desire. Okay? He wanted to see. So the angel makes known unto him the interpretation of the matter. He starts describing the figures that you see, that Daniel's seen in that vision. And he gives you the interpretation, which indirectly interprets Revelation 13 for us also, doesn't it? Think about that long and hard. Think about it. Should we go anywhere else than the book that we already have. We go to the Pope, go to Muhammad, we go to the newspapers. Do we look at our little community, see what's taking place in our little community, and interpret Revelation 13 by that? No. We go to the book. It's the source. The Old Testament, source of the New Testament. It's real simple. If we'll just let the Bible speak to us like it has this morning, hopefully, this won't be too hard. It'll actually bring joy. I know it does me when I can do the comparison work. Well, compare beast to beast, leopard to leopard, lion to lion, bear to bear, and come up with the sum of the matters. You can see what Daniel saw, and you can see what John see. Like I said, I hope this has been helpful, and I hope you continue to study with us, because it's my prayer that it will be fruitful for you. And just as Paul says in Romans 15:4, all that was written aforetime was written for our learning, that we through patience and comfort of the Scriptures might have hope. You look back in Daniel, you look back in John's time, you see that unrest, you see that tribulation that was taking place. You look in our time, you see the things taking place around you, and perhaps it brings fear to you. It makes you fear, it makes you worry, it fills you full of anxiety. Let the Scriptures be your comfort. Because as he is declared in 2 Corinthians 6:1 and in 2 Corinthians 1, he is the God of all comfort. He will comfort you in times of peril and trouble. Now, brethren, if you have a need, we want to address that need in as much